Okay, let's rock and roll.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today on another edition of Extreme Health Radio. We've got a great show. I'm really excited. I'm excited about every show. So this one's going to be great, though. I'm really, really excited about having Konstantin Monastresky on, talking about The Fiber Menace, his book. So thanks for joining us. Today is Wednesday, December 5th, 2012 already. My birthday's coming up in a few days, so that'll be fun. The year's rolling on. This is episode number 44. So you could find the transcription, show notes, and all that good jazz on extremehealthradio.com/44. And we broadcast worldwide from Southern California 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And last I checked, we were in 84 countries. So we went up to 4 more countries. Amazing. So thank you for your support and your listenership. If you have any questions, send them to Justin at extremehealthradio.com, and I will ask your question to our guest on the air. And you can also call our voicemail line, which is 949-391-7363, and I'll play your message to our guest on the air. Just to let you know, this episode is brought to you by a little contraption called the Squatty Potty, and it's a little stool that fits neatly underneath your toilet, and it allows you to get into a better position as you're going to the bathroom. You can check that out at extremehealthradio.com/squat. So that's a really interesting little product. And before I introduce Konstantin, I want to tell you a little bit about our upcoming show schedule. This Friday, we've got Deborah Lynn Dadd, who does a lot of work in helping people to detoxify their home and workplaces. So if you have toxic chemicals and toxic things you're exposed to, she helps to provide alternatives. And then on Monday, we've got Dr. Brian Clement of the Hippocrates Institute in Florida, and that should be a great show talking about natural healing. And speaking of natural healing, we have David Christopher, who runs the School of Natural Healing. He's an herbalist, and that school's been around since 1953, so that should be a great show. But today we've got Konstantin Monastresky, and he wrote a book called The Fiber Menace. It's quite a profound book. He talks a lot about digestive issues, so we're going to be talking a lot about poop and digesting food, and that's where it all starts. So thank you, Konstantin, for being on the show today. I really appreciate that.
Hello, Justin, and hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me in. Happy birthday. Oh. And I envy you being in Southern California. I'm in this freaking cold New Jersey.
You staying warm out there?
Well, inside, yes.
Got your coffee maybe and a jacket and you're ready to go.
Well, my age, no more coffee.
No more coffee, huh?
No.
Do you not drink it for a specific reason, or?
Well, yes. I'm an addictive individual, so anything that is not good for you, I like. And so if I have a cup of coffee, 2 hours down, I want to have a nap. And so to avoid a nap, I take another one. And so my day goes with coffee, and then I cannot sleep at night. So it ruins my life.
That's a vicious cycle. Well, I want to read for our listeners the table of contents to your book. It's really, really interesting, if you don't mind. The Fiber Carnage is Chapter 1, Water Damage. Atkins goes to South Beach, dysbacteriosis, constipation, hemorrhoidal disease, diverticular disease, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, colon cancer, avoiding the perils of transition, the low fiber advantage, and in health we trust. This book is really amazing thing. When did you write this?
Thank you very much. I wrote it in 2005 primarily, but I did spend about 2 years of researching it. And I preceded this book with a title entitled The Atkins Diet, why Dr. Atkins, why you're still overweight and Dr. Atkins is dead, and something along those lines. And essentially, while writing that book, it didn't see the light of day because the gentleman passed away, disgraced his own diet, passed away very obese. So my publisher called me up and said, Konstantin, we really cannot do this book because nobody wants to do Atkins anymore. There is nothing to fix. And what I found in the process is that constipation is one of the primary side effects that people encounter when they switch to Atkins. And while researching this whole subject of constipation, I came to the conclusion that dietary fiber, is a primary cause of constipation, a delayed one, not immediate one. Like if you are dealing with a 2-year-old toddler, and it's not likely, but for adults, especially in their 40s and 50s, fiber does contribute to constipation profoundly.
Wow, it's so opposite, obviously, which is why you wrote the book, but it's so opposite of what we've been told our whole lives concerning fiber, and I'm sure you get that question a lot.
Well, interestingly, when you say about whole life, I'm 58, and I came in the United States in 78, so I was only 24. And in those years, you didn't hear anything about fiber. So fiber is a fairly recent phenomenon. It's only about last 20 to 25 years, and we hear so much about it because commercial interests make a lot of money. What's a fiber? Fiber is something that people used to discard. Bran, it was discarded, or it was sold a ton was for a few bucks to feed the livestock. Mm-hmm. And suddenly this garbage became health food, and you can mark it up and add to anything, and you make an enormous amount of money. And so why we have it? And people say, well, it's impossible. That my doctor is telling me that you need to take fibers, this and that. But if you go to the FDA website and will investigate if you can peddle fiber for constipation, FDA says, no, you can't. It's against the law. It's prohibited. There is absolutely no proof that fiber does anything for constipation. And in fact, fiber can cause a lot of problems, especially with digestion and so forth and so on. So that's a story. So people actually believe what is not the truth, but that's a myth about fiber benefits is very skillfully perpetrated by a tremendous, by our essentially food producers. It's a huge industry. So where lots of money and lots of profit to be made, people will believe anything they want.
I'm on your colorectal recovery page, and I want to just tell people this talk about fiber and digestion and going to the bathroom. Let me just read off some of the things that you have on the right-hand side. So in case people are listening and thinking, oh, well, I don't have any digestive issues. These are things like anal fissures, anal rectal nerve damage, antibiotics, bloating, blood disorders, chemotherapy side effects, colonoscopy recoveries, dependence on laxatives, diverticular disease, easy bruising, eczema, hair loss, heavy metal poisoning, hemorrhoids, involuntary flatulence, irritable bowel syndrome. So, the list goes on. Premenstrual syndrome, seborrheic dermatitis, yeast infections. So digesting your food is everything, isn't it? Everything starts with the digestive tract, doesn't it?
That is correct. And it's very, very easy to explain. People say, explain me in 2 seconds why fiber is so damaging. Mm-hmm. Fiber is known as a bulking agent. Its function is to bulk up your stools to make them larger. But unfortunately, we have a very tiny anus. And so if you bulk up something that comes from top, and on the exit you have a very, very tiny anus, it will end up damaging it. And so it causes pain. You have to strain. And when you have to strain and it's painful, then you have incomplete emptying. And if you have incomplete emptying, too much crap stays inside your colon, and that causes damages. And those damages just proliferate. And if you're still young and supple, that's okay. It's survivable. But if you get into my age, 45, 50, 55, you're no longer young and supple. Your skin becomes kind of brittle, and that's where the damages really start to occur, and that's where you incur most of the damages.
Right. Makes sense. So now let's start at the beginning. What happens when we eat? Let's say we eat something that's got a lot of fiber in it. What's going on? It goes into the mouth, obviously down your throat, into the stomach, and then what happens?
Well, notice actually it gets stuck between your teeth, and we have lots of bacteria in our mouths, and they start to ferment. And so soluble and particularly soluble fiber, it's a very sticky substance, and it stays on the surface of your enamel. And when bacteria starts to act on it, it became acidified, and that's what causes cavities. And it's also what causes gingivitis and dental disease. So the damage starts already as you begin chewing.
Okay.
Then fiber gets down into your stomach, and there nothing happens. It just sits there. But while it sits there, it sucks water that is in your stomach from digestive juices and from what you consume. And it actually can cause clogging of a sphincter between your stomach and your duodenum. And that may lead to a delayed stomach emptying. And if you have a delayed stomach emptying, that leads to a chronic gastritis, may lead to ulcer disease, may lead to heartburn, GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and on and on and on. So it's like nonstop. And then it gets into duodenum, and that's where really problems start because, like young soldiers, what is the most common digestive problem in young soldiers who get into army, especially like in Russia? I don't know how. Well, states the same thing. Anywhere where the soldiers get like a lot of really rough macaroni products, so pasta, beans, they develop duodenum ulcers. And the reason why is because when so much dense stuff, especially like expanded with water, gets in, it just cannot move as fast, and it brings with it acid from the stomach, and it brings digestive enzymes from the stomach. So it's very, very easy to ulcerate or cause inflammatory condition in small intestine. And all along the way, as fiber transits through the small intestine, what it does, it inhibits digestion and inhibits assimilation. And in fact, it's a well-known fact that people sell weight loss products, fiber-based weight loss products. And what do? Their function is to block digestion and assimilation of fats in your small intestine. Now, think about it, how stupid it is. We have 4 vitamins absolutely critical for health. Vitamin A, you don't get enough, you go blind. Vitamin D, you don't get enough, you go impotent, your bones become brittle, you become moody, because you get cancers and so forth and so on. We need this vitamin to digest, but people consume great lots of fiber. It doesn't digest. Vitamin K, it is responsible for blood coagulation. Again, if you consume a diet high in fiber, it inhibits the assimilation of vitamin K, and so you may have bleedings of unexplained nature and bruisings and so forth and so on. And finally, vitamin E, it's a very, very important vitamin, comes in a lot of natural foods. Primarily, it's a fat-based vitamin, and if you don't get enough, you have weak immunity and men and impotence and women infertility. And that's what we attain essentially when we consume fiber. How stupid it is.
Yeah, and then it goes from the small intestine to the large intestine?
And that's where really it begins to wreak havoc because unlike small intestine and stomach, colon is a very slow organ, and it starts with ascending colon, meaning that gravitation no longer works. You have a very, very slow peristaltic activities. They're loaded with bacteria. Little kids, if you have children, don't give them fiber of any kind. In fact, in Europe, when parents prepare food for children, they clean skins from everything, from tomatoes, from grapes, and they say, God forbid, don't swallow skin, don't swallow seeds, because it's fiber, it's non-digestible, and it's a very high chance for kids to develop appendicitis. Adults have a much larger appendicitis, so it's not as easy to infect, but children are very vulnerable to that specific condition. And then when foods enter into the large intestine, we start with an organ called cecum, or blind gut, and that's where foods sit, and this process of turning a semi-liquid content that came from your small intestine into solid stools begins, and it doesn't work for gravitation. It actually has to be propelled up, and so if you have really loaded, very, very heavy stool, it delays your colon function, and fiber is being pedaled for like speeding up the goings on in the colon, but actually it's in reverse. Actually, it slows down profoundly, but it does bulk up the stools, and so when you carry so much bulk and you're young and you're sensitive, obviously, yes, of course, you will have a much stronger defecation reflex and much faster, and yes, it will improve your stool functions, especially if you have acute dysbacteriosis, meaning you don't have enough bacteria in your colon to work efficiently. But if you're already constipated and you put fiber on top of it, essentially you use it as a plunger, and it works for a while, but what is the way of its working? It's essentially plunging you out, and so plunging through that very small anus causes various kind of problems. And the problem number one is internal hemorrhoids. And what internal hemorrhoids do, they inflame, they increase in size, and they narrow your opening in the anal canal even more. And that's eventually, 5-10 years of the therapy, and that's where you really get plugged. And that's where I come in.
Yeah.
Help me out, don't plug.
Wow. So what's the main argument that doctors give for eating fiber?
Doctors are clueless about this topic. The doctors are telling you what they read in primary medical textbooks. Primary medical textbooks were primarily developed by pharmaceutical companies and by at least in the United States, contributed by United States Department of Agriculture. All those people have vested interest in seeing you sick, so you buy a lot of drugs, and USDA has a vested interest to see you buying a lot of grain products, because that's what our diacantry produces in tremendous quantities, and they can be stored indefinitely in elevators. And so we have a great interest peddling that stuff, and that's what doctors know. Doctors, now, if let's say I went to medical school and I did have some course about fiber. I was 21 or 20 at the time, and believe me, all I cared is about, a girl sitting next to me, I didn't care about that fiber. I would cram it for an exam. So I didn't know a thing about it.
Right.
And also when you're young, you can load yourself with anything, with coffee, with alcohol, with fiber, with God knows what. You'll survive it. So it doesn't really apply that much to younger people. But again, past 30, 35, especially, and women are also very vulnerable because women, while they're pregnant, women used to deliver kids very, very easily. Because they were very physical, very strong pelvic muscles, and children also were very small because women were not overfed as they are today. But now we have a very large kids inside the womb is very large. Women are physically weak, and so they really have to push very hard, and that's how they develop hemorrhoids during delivery. And so when you add fiber on top of that, that's where you really start to cause yourself very serious damage. So girls, be very careful with that stuff. It will really ruin your life. And one of the very common problem among women in the United States of America is called rectocele, meaning when your rectum actually what's the word? I lost it.
Like stretches or...
the wall, a wall of human rectum and vagina, they have adjoining walls, and so when you have this kind of propulsion, almost diverticular from vagina into rectum, or vice versa, from rectum to vagina, a very serious problem for a lot of women.
Oh my gosh! Wow, we are just scratching the surface. We've got so much to get to. I'm really fascinated by this. So we are with Konstantin. How do you say your last name? Monastersky. Monastersky. Okay, and his website is it fibermenace.com?
That is correct. Godsense.org, actually. I changed it. It's more, a website is, interestingly, my book, Fiber Menace, is about fiber and damages caused by fiber and conditions developed from consuming fiber. Okay. After I released the book in 2005, a lot of people started to come to approach me and say, okay, fine, I got your point. I will get off the fiber, but how do I deal with all other problems? And I started to write another book. It was entitled Godsense. And especially, it was dealing primarily with conditions related to damages from fiber and from contemporary nutrition and from antibiotics and so forth. So the full title of this book was Godsense: How to Reverse and Prevent Constipation and Irregularity in Children and Adults.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, the whole content of this book, I never ended up putting it on paper. It's on my website. Lots and lots of chapters, enormous amount of information. And I guess in the process, developing the subject for several years, I became a world's leading expert in this stuff. So I proudly call myself a doctor of crapology.
Okay, that's good. That's a good one. All right, so it's gutsense.org, and we will be right back. We got to run this quick spot, and we'll be right back after this break. If you're looking to enjoy the best health possible, it's critical that you move. And if you sit in an office chair all day like I do, it's pretty much a guarantee that you are very, very stiff. We had a guy on our show named Lucas Rockwood, and he was on episode number 10. You can check that out. But he's got a product called Yoga Body Naturals, and I really, really love his product and his entire approach to yoga and how yoga can improve your life in so many ways. So I highly recommend, check it out at extremehealthradio.com/yoga. And it comes with a workbook, audio and video manuals. He also has physical products on his site too, like yoga trapezes, and he teaches you how to do certain poses to double your flexibility in 7 days. Could you imagine that? And being flexible in every area of your life is really, really a great thing. And yoga is a great part of my life. I love doing yoga. I also weight train and do weights and stuff like that. But yoga is really, really a great workout in addition to my life. So I really support Lucas Rockwood at Yoga Body Naturals. And please check out extremehealthradio.com/yoga if you're looking to get more flexible and to improve your digestion and to get on a better, healthier way of living. He's really got lots of great products on that website. So check that out. And also sign up for his mailing list too. He's got really, really a great email list going on there. So thanks for listening. You can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/yoga. And let's get back to this interview. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. We are with Konstantin Monastersky, and his website is gutsense.org. And Konstantin, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for people as we started out. Now, digestion and diseases are so tightly correlated, and I've heard for many, many years that all disease begins in the colon. Is that true? And if it is, let's talk a little bit about how the colon and the digestion really does tie into everything that we do.
You are correct. The saying goes that health begins and ends in the gut.
Okay.
And when people refer to gut, they have a much broader sense of what gut is. They don't necessarily mean the large intestines, they also mean the small intestine, because the small intestine is absolutely critical organ. It's very easy to chew, very easy to swallow. Our stomach is a very strong organ, but that's the real vulnerability starts in the gut, meaning in the small intestine where food's supposed to assimilate. And any inflammatory condition in the small intestine inhibits proper digestion. It inhibits digestion of fluids. It inhibits digestion of gases that are formed during the process of digestion. That's what bloating comes from. And it inhibits digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, microelements, macroelements such as calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. And all those components are critical for our health and for our longevity, because our body, essentially, we eat for two reasons: for energy metabolism, meaning to just move around, and for structural metabolism, meaning divisions of cells. Mm-hmm. So if you don't get enough necessary components for structural metabolism for your cells to divide, you start to develop every conceivable disease: atherosclerosis, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, gout, dementia, you name it. I mean, it all comes from you not being able to assimilate. And so we have to be very, very conscious of the fact that we assimilate. It's not so important. I mean, what we eat is critical, but it's even more critical what we assimilate out of what we eat. So we have to work very, very hard to protect the small intestine. Our largest organ is almost 15 meters long. 3 meters long, 15 foot long. 5 meters long. Mm-hmm. I'm confused with measurements, Americans, European. And so it's very, very critical. And gut, yes, and the colon is very, very important, because if you don't expel what came from your mouth, then you do run into problems, and those problems cascade throughout your health through pain, discomfort, bloating, and so forth and so on.
So now I know there's two different types of the fibers, the insoluble and the soluble. Are you talking about fiber supplements that people take, or are you talking about foods that people eat that contain additional fibers that aren't healthy? Like if someone eats a tomato or an apple, is that bad, or is it the beans and things like that people are?
Justin, it's a great question. Let me clarify for all our listeners.
Okay.
I have no beef with natural fiber that you can consume from natural unprocessed foods, because they contain very, very little of it. I'm assuming, our dear listeners, that you're smart enough not to eat potatoes with skins. They're very dirty to begin with. Mm-hmm. You're smart enough to not consume lots of grapes with skins, and so apples and oranges. And whatever you get from flesh, it's not really that fiber rich. So if you don't overeat, if you are not like a huge prodigious eater, you are not going to have a lot of fiber with your food. In fact, our medical authorities say they are on the record. American diet lacks enough fiber because you cannot get enough fiber from natural food. Thanks God. If we would be on the same diet 100 years ago during Industrial Revolution, we would be a very weak nation. We would never become America that is known to most of the world. And now we are in a tremendous decline, and this decline partially related to a poor health. Just imagine, 140 million Americans work on regular jobs. Guess how many Americans take prescription medication? 145 million. We have 105 million people affected by diabetes and prediabetes. 70 million people affected by hypertension. I mean, we're a very, very sick nation. That's why we spend such a tremendous amount of money for our health care. And that's why it's breaking us. We no longer have money left from our taxes to invest in education, in infrastructure, and to support our military. We have to borrow money from China. So it's, so our diet is not really that healthy, contemporary diet. So back to your question, I am against added fiber. I am against fibers that intentionally added to products to bulk them up, to make them more valuable to sell, to make them more profitable to sell. These are primarily cereals, pasta products with added fiber, and laxatives, obviously. All the laxatives that contain fiber, they're also very harmful because that's a concentrated source of fiber. So if you take wafers, or you take some powder, or you take capsules with fiber-containing capsules, you're causing yourself a lot of damage.
Okay, so now, is there an issue with people if they blend their food in blenders? Does that break down any fibers? Let's say they're doing lots of fruit or things like that. Does the blended food have any change in fiber content?
Well, fiber content remains the same.
Okay.
And soluble fiber in itself, soluble fiber is the one that is water soluble. It kind of, if you add a lot of it to water, you get something like a jelly. And it's very harmful because it blocks digestion in the small intestine, and it leads to, as medical authorities say, myriad of digestive disorders.
Okay.
And also, when it reaches your undigested, when it reaches your large intestine, it becomes a feed for bacteria that's inside your colon, and it leads to a lot of fermentations there. And fermentation, as anybody who made beer or wine knows, that this is a process where you produce alcohols, you produce acidity, and you produce lots of gases. And so the reasons that so many people are somnolent, it's because fermentation produces alcohol, and so they're kind of unintentionally drunk. And the reason so many people are bloated is because there are so many gases produced there. And the reason so many people in the United States have irritable bowel syndrome, or inflammatory bowel disease, or ulcerative colitis, or Crohn's disease is because they have such a high degree of acidity and a high level of alcohols and high level of various metabolites in the intestinal organs that they cannot get rid fast. And obviously, when you consume a great deal of insoluble fiber, meaning the one that doesn't get digested at all, it reaches the large intestine intact, absorbs even more water, and bulks up the stools, and causes actually mechanical pressure on not only on the walls of your large intestine, but also on all the adjoining organs, be it a bladder or be it female reproductive organs. And that's where we are well known for being like a country with the highest rate of premenstrual syndrome. And so when you have uterus in the immediate neighborhood, it was a very, very tight abdominal cavity along with the large intestine, and you have this whole fermenting factory going on there, no wonder you will then experience pain sensation, especially during periods, and then you will become so irritable and cranky.
Wow. So does the fiber, does it actually damage the intestinal villi?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yes, it does, because it causes inflammatory conditions. And every time you have inflammatory conditions, there is a great risk of essentially degeneration of all the tissues that are there. In the stomach, it's called atrophic gastritis. And if you notice, a lot of people now experiencing like spikes in the small intestine. Crohn's disease is quite prevalent, and Crohn's disease causes to a complete devastation of a villi. And essentially, you no longer have digestion in those particular sections which were impacted. And that comes from inflammatory condition first, and a scarring tissue which forms during the inflammation.
Wow. So is it possible to come back all the way from Crohn's, colitis, and IBS? Is it possible to completely heal from that stuff?
It is possible to completely heal from IBS in the early stages. You go further up into inflammatory bowel disease, IBD. No, you cannot completely heal, because the moment you develop intestinal inflammation, then we develop a lot of antibodies to various food components. And so autoimmune component plays a huge role in digestive disorders, and then why they're so difficult to actually conquer, because every time you take any kind of food that your body already has antibodies for against, your autoimmune system kicks in, and those foods can be completely innocent for a lot of people.
And so that's why you have people allergic to certain foods now, right?
That is correct, yes. And now obviously we have a very profound increase in those allergies, especially in young children, and obviously adults as well.
Right. Yeah, my wife is allergic to peanuts, and she's got that peanut allergy. I forget what that's called, but yeah.
It's called peanut allergy.
Yeah. anaphylactic shock, I think is.
Well, that's like a very late. That's really when crap hits the fan. So it's a late stage of that. Most people are allergic, but thanks God they don't get anaphylexia.
Okay, so let me just get a little anatomy lesson here. So the small intestine, is it primarily its job to extract the nutrients and minerals and things like that, and then
that is correct.
Okay, and then the food moves into the large intestine in order to bulk up and to be fermented. Is that right? What's the role of the large intestine?
Well, large intestine plays a very, very important role in digestive and immune role and so forth and so on. First, when foods come to, well, actually, it's also a misnomer. You cannot say foods come to a large intestine. If you have a proper digestion, only about 5% of food residue comes to the large intestine. Very, very small amount. Most of the stuff that comes into the large intestine is water, meaning digestive fluids, undigested nutrients, and cellular debris, which is secreted through gallbladder and liver into the lumen of the duodenum and leaves the body out. So when liquid content comes into the large intestine, it's mostly water, about 95% water. And normal human stool, its water content is 75%. So as you can see, stool is really not foods. I mean, all the food's supposed to digest completely. Fat, the rate of digestion of fats is about 99.8%. In fact, if you see fats in your stool, you have a condition, a clinical condition that is not good, meaning that you don't either produce not enough bile, or you have a congestion in your duodenum and your bile ducts, and so you do have problems. Secondly, proteins digest completely, 100%, except proteins contain what is called, when you take a piece of meat, it's also about 80% water, and you burn it, there is some stuff that's remaining, and it's referred to as ash. And so the same amount of ash, meaning minerals which are in a protein, iron, potassium, what have you, will come to the large intestine. Very, very small percentage, 2%. Obviously, water digests almost completely, except that water that is retained in digestive fluids. And carbohydrates, if they are simple sugars, they digest 100%. So the remaining solid content of your stools is primarily ash, 3 to 5%, unless you add a lot of fiber in your diet, undigestible substance, and then it will reach the large intestine. Once this content is called chyme, reaches your large intestine, what happens next, it begins to extract water out of it so that you don't have diarrhea. If you have a breakdown in the process, like people with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, where their colon is no longer capable of sucking water out of the chyme, then they have a chronic diarrhea, and that's a very, very serious problem for them. So, secondly, the colon recovers salt. That's why we do need salt is absolutely critical. Sodium chloride is absolutely critical for health, and that's what colon does. That's why we don't need so much salt, because it kind of retains and stays in the system. And people say, "Oh, come on, doctors are telling me otherwise." And I always ask people this question: explain to me something. When you end up in a hospital, the first thing they do, they suck a needle into your vein and they pump you with salty water, right? So how come a substance that is critical for life, 1%, well, technically 0.9% of sodium chloride in all the human fluids, and suddenly it's harmful? So if you do go on a low sodium diet, you start to create a lot of damage in your body. It may lead to dehydration, it may lead to edema, it always leads to indigestion, because sodium chloride is essential for producing hydrochloric acid. If you don't have enough chloride in the system, then you don't have enough hydrochloric acids, and you start developing indigestion and so forth and so on. And next function of the colon has a lot of bacteria. And these bacteria are responsible for slightly bulking up the stools, but even more so, they are responsible for maintaining your immune system, especially primary immune response called phagocytosis. And that's what they do. And also they produce a whole range of vitamins. That's why healthy people who never took antibiotics, they can pretty much live all their life, and they only need a very small amounts of vitamin C. But once you took antibiotics at least once, antibiotics decimated your intestinal flora, and it no longer produces a broad range of vitamins, starting from vitamin K, which is critical for blood coagulation, regulation, and also vitamin B12 and a whole range of B vitamins. And in fact, it's not even well known what's happening there, but what is well known, if you have a damage of flora, then you very quickly become deficient in those critical supplements, and that's why you have to take them from outside.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people do the fermented foods and things like that.
Useless,
right?
Completely useless. It's all just junk.
Wow, so the large intestine, that's where most of your bacteria lives, and that's where a lot of the conversions take place.
That is correct.
Golly, this is amazing information. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and run this commercial now, and we'll be back right after this break with Konstantin Monastresky. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you have been following our work for any length of time, you understand the role of beneficial bacteria. And I'm wondering if you have incorporated any fermented foods into your diet. There's a great course recommended by Donna Gates, actually, and it's called How to Ferment Anything. And you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/ferment. And it teaches you how to make all of these amazing, wonderful fermented foods. And if you know anything about the role of bacteria in digestion, it's absolutely critical for you to have fermented foods in your diet. Every culture has had fermented foods as part of their staple in their diet for as long as you can go back and remember. So I highly recommend learning how to make fermented foods and incorporating these foods into your diet, because they are extremely powerful for helping you to digest your food, improve your digestion. And as you know, all disease begins in the colon. So having better digestion and increasing your load of beneficial bacteria is going to help you to prevent sicknesses and diseases, colds and flus, as well as more major diseases as well. So I highly recommend you learning how to ferment some foods, and they taste delicious too, just so you know. So check it out at extremehealthradio.com/ferment to learn more. All right, we are with Konstantin Monastresky from gutsense.org, and my mind is being blown here with all this information. So, Konstantin, I wanted to ask you, how long do you think people could live if they took care of their colon, avoided being exposed to toxins and chemicals and all of the stresses of life, and if they just kind of lived a clean, happy life and ate completely the way they should? How long do you think the human body on average could live?
Well, there are a couple of regions that gave us a proof of what people can live when they lead a natural life. Mm-hmm. That's Okinawa in Japan. That's Costa Rica, Sardinia in Italy. I know Loma Linda also in that bunch, but it's really for different reasons. And Okinawa is known as pork capital of the world, or pork capital of the Japan. Sardinia, it's primarily a mountainous region, and so they don't have any agriculture out there, as well as in Okinawa, they don't have any serious agriculture. They don't have enough arable land to grow food crops. Mm-hmm. So they're dependent primarily on seafoods, meats, whatever they can hunt, or fish. And Costa Rica is primarily also same thing, mountainous regions, where they get a lot of seafood and lots of meats from, again, whatever they can hunt, and fish. And Cuba, by the way, it's not well known, but people in Cuba, especially people who live next to water, they live a very, very long lives, despite the fact that they all smoke. Japan, 100% of men smoke, and they're very profuse drink. I mean, they drink enormous amount of alcohol, consume a lot of alcohol. And they still manage, Japan as a society managed to live much longer than Americans. They spend only half of what we spend on healthcare, and they're very healthy. And one of the reasons is Japanese diet, primarily rice and seafood and fish-based proteins, and consumed primarily raw. So they're not cooked, and they're very wholesome in that respect. So my guess is it's almost impossible to live that lifestyle of people in Costa Rica or Sardinia or Okinawa if you live in a city or suburbs, simply because you do not drink the same water as they drink unprocessed water from artesian wells. You don't spend as much time as they do on sun, which is absolutely critical for health because it's a factor that produces vitamin D. And you don't get to eat fresh fruits. And obviously you don't breathe the same clean air. And you are exposed to a great deal of risks of dealing with a contemporary medicine. and you're completely dependent on sanitation facilities. And if, God forbid, something breaks, then we have profuse infections, and a lot of people die in the process. And we have a very high noise pollution. And obviously, we have industrial pollution and pollution from automobiles, and we don't care about our bodies, and we don't have social networks as good as those people have, where there is a great deal of respect for elderly people, and they live in the same house all their life, and they don't deal with industry, and they all take care of themselves from very early on. And so if we can live the way those people live, we can probably live in a fairly good health into our late 80s, early 90s. There are obviously exceptions, people who live into their hundreds, and they all have one thing in common. They are very small, they are petite, they are about 5'5", tops 5'7", no more. Women are even smaller. And a small body means that your heart doesn't have to work as hard. If you are an average 5'10" American, and especially overweight, then your heart really works overtime, and it wears out even before cancers will kill you. And for people like me, who is fairly small, I'm 5'7", 140 pounds, so I'm pretty good shape for men at 58. And I used to be, by the way, 5'7", size 42. Now I'm 5'7", size 32. And I was very overweight and diabetic, and so that's how the journey started, actually. So I did cause my body a lot of damage. And for people like me who are cognizant of the fact that a wear and tear of cardiovascular system is a primary cause of death, about 75%, those people like me die from cancers. How early? Only God knows, because obviously our bodies encounter lots and lots of damage. People who live in natural environments, cancers is very, very rare. And it's not only natural environment outside, it also means that you don't have DSP products in your house, you don't deal with phenol, you don't have exposure to dental amalgams, you don't have exposure to drugs. You don't bring polluted air from building materials, from paints, and so lots and lots of issues. But that's a very long answer for a very simple question. And by the way, Justin, if I'm too long, just stop me and I'll keep a short version of the same.
No problem. I wonder if that has a correlation to men and women as far as their size, their body size, and women living longer than men, because I've heard that too, where people typically live longer when they're shorter and smaller than larger people.
Yes, for as long as women remains normal weight, yes, she will have an edge. Even overweight women live quite long, much longer than underweight. Actually, being overweight is superior to being underweight, but unfortunately for overweight women, their fat tissues produce lots of estrogen, and estrogen may contribute to genital cancers and breast cancers much earlier, and it's maybe the cause of just death. I have one of my aunts. She was like a most overweight person, most obese person I've ever seen in my life. She's still alive at 94. That said, I'm taking care of her for the last 10 or 12 years, and if not for that, she would be dead a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of cancers a second ago, I just recently had a friend that died of colon cancer, and I think that is the number 2 cause of all cancer deaths. Is that right?
Oh, no. It's a very minor one. There are only 140,000 casualties a year. And a great deal of those people have what is called genetic cancer, meaning they will die usually around 42, 45. But then we have mechanical cancers that are related to environment, and that's all the remainings. And actually, it's an old people disease. People die from colon cancer primarily if they survive the genetic one, in their 70s and 80s, so in late 60s.
Wow. So colon cancer is really cancer of the large intestine. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. The rectum and large intestine.
Rectum and large intestine. And that has a correlation to the fiber, do you think?
I think fiber is the primary cause of colon cancers. Because the fiber is the only substance that can create a very hostile environment. Well, actually, it's very, very easy. I mean, if people who have ulcerative colitis, which is inflammatory bowel disease, they have a 32 times greater chance of having a colon cancer than people who don't.
Oh, wow.
So, and what is causing the most inflammatory conditions in the large intestine? Undigested food components. And what is the primary undigested food components in the American diet? Is dietary fiber. So, you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to actually do studies. It's just right on the surface. It's absolutely apparent and transparent, at least to somebody like me.
What do you think of all the health people getting the colonics and things like that, enemas? And are those things good, or are they harmful? Or what are your thoughts about those?
I think they're harmful. I think people talk with me a lot about cleaning, and I say, golly, clean your eyes, clean your ears, clean your nose, clean your teeth. But we don't have, like in nature, people who gave us Passover, our ancestors, their genes, they didn't have access to colonics. They didn't have access to enemas. They never did it. They have natural, unassisted, unnoticeable defecation, the same way as they urinated. I mean, do you clean your bladder? No, you don't. You urinate. So if you do actually get to the point where you have to clean forcefully your colon, something is wrong there. So normal colon never requires any cleaning. The content of it is sterile, and the content of it is beneficial. And when you start to intervene inside, pumping fluids and this and that, obviously there is always a risk of damage. There is always a risk of propulsing those fluids past the ileocal valve into small intestine, causing their bacterial infestation. And so, yeah, I don't think, I don't buy those things. Okay. Now, if you already have a problem with constipation, I understand the reasons why people are doing it, but there are some better ways of accomplishing the same result.
What about herbal cleanses of your colon and things like that?
Very harmful, because they are essentially, they cause potentially, they decimate your flora, they decimate a protective layer of mucosal membrane, and also they, because they're hostile substances, they may cause autoimmune reactions to them, and eventually it may lead to inflammatory bowel disease.
Golly, that's fascinating. We don't hear that very often, do we?
I'm from completely different camp of thought, and I am about 5 to 10 years ahead of the curve. It's a curse. It's not a blessing. A lot of people think that what I say is heresy. But every single theory that I put forth in the last 10, 12 years, they're now being confirmed. I was the first person 10 years ago proclaiming that diverticular disease is related to fiber. Everybody was saying, no, that's nonsense. Fiber is the cure for diverticular disease. And now you have a bunch of studies confirming that the thing. And so as we go, all other thoughts will be confirmed. But also, as I said in the beginning of our program, FDA is on the record saying, hey, promoting fiber for constipation relief is illegal. It doesn't work for constipation relief. And if you open up the most authoritative texts on gastric disorders, such as ROM2 and ROM3, it says black and white. No single study proved that fiber has any benefit for constipation. People who take fiber, they don't have any faster transit time, and they are as much constipated as people who don't take fiber.
Oh my gosh. So what kind of foods do you eat?
I eat Japanese-style diet. I eat rice with butter. The only difference is that people in Japan, they consume a lot of alcohol, and so they don't eat as much butter as I do. And also they're accustomed from early childhood to rice without butter. So I eat organic butter from preferably free-range animals. It's very rich in polyunsaturated fats with white rice. That's my lunch and midday snack. And at the end of the day, usually when I'm relaxed, I eat either a piece of meat or a piece of fish, also with white rice and with butter. And that's primarily all I eat. And I drink mineral water. I try to drink mineral water. Obviously, I take supplements. It's essential for my age and considering all the damage that my body incurred.
Do you do any...
So very, very simple diet.
Do you do any fruits or anything like that for breakfast?
I eat absolutely no fruits, no fruits, and I practically don't eat any vegetables. The only vegetables that I may consume is like when my wife cooks something, whatever vegetables are there. I don't consume tomatoes. I don't eat potatoes. They're all highly allergenic. Now, remember, again, if you're healthy and you're not overweight and you don't have any inflammatory diseases, which I all have from my bout with diabetes, multi-year bout with diabetes, and all my digestive disorders, which developed from being on a vegetarian or vegan diet with high fiber diet. So my body is incredibly sensitive, and I do it for survival. I don't do it to prove a point. I do it simply because if I eat outside of those parameters, I do have a very severe reaction, and I can develop just very nasty conditions, and that's just to keep myself healthy. And my health history is described on my site. So if you go there and you go to my autobiography, you can read it. So I'm not like a freak. I don't say repeat after me. That's silly. I say do what's right for your body for as long as you are fit, healthy, in good mood, and have good sleep and no problems. Just do whatever you're doing is probably doing it right. Also, younger people and more physically active people, they have much more food than I do because I'm a writer. I lead a relatively sedentary lifestyle. My only exercise is gym, and I go there, and my exercise is pathetic. I just walk very fast on a thread machine for 40 minutes. So I'm not an athlete by any means. Justin, I envy you. You can exercise a lot and eat a lot. I wish I had this lifestyle.
Yeah, I love exercising, but so now with the food and the chicken that you're eating or the fish that you're eating.
Chicken, sorry, no chicken.
I'm sorry, yeah, the fish that you're eating. Is there any issues with the heavy metals or mercury or anything like that in the fish?
I don't eat enough fish. Heavy metals and mercury, they are primarily relevant to large fish like tuna, shark, and I don't consume those meats in amounts near where to provide me with a level of exposure to mercury that is risky.
Okay, so now some of the foods that we were talking about earlier that people should avoid, what do you think? Any boxed food, packaged food?
My rule of thumb, when you go walk into a supermarket and you take any food and you have to ask yourself this question: could my grandma or granddad ate this particular food when they were alive? And if the answer is no, you cannot eat it either. It's a very, very simple formula. So if you look at tomato in December of 2012, and you live in the United States or in Europe, your grandparents, first of all, they didn't even eat tomatoes. They were kind of considered toxic. They're very highly allergenic and not healthy for people. But even if they ate them, they could probably consume them in June, July. That's it, about maybe 2 months top. They had no refrigeration. They have no storage facilities. Tomatoes were not cultivated in those years. So you look at any product and you ask yourself, can my ancestors consume that food when they were alive? If the answer is no, you can't have it either because it's not good for you.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a good way to look at it. We have to cut out for Natural News Radio. Thank you to Mike Adams for having us on his network. We appreciate him. So the tomatoes and other foods like that, the skins, I think, are hard to digest, isn't it?
Yes, they're not digestible. They're essentially like swallowing paper. Same thing. Skins, that's why they leave. That's why in France and in Italy, chefs take skins from tomatoes so that people don't get scared when they look down the toilet.
What other foods have that type of characteristic?
The two most allergenic foods are strawberries and tomatoes. And the next one is potatoes. Obviously, peanuts, beans, they contain lots of fiber and lots of allergens. And you have to remember that fruits and vegetables, they develop a lot of toxins to protect themselves, to protect their seeds from being eaten by insects. And so they have naturally occurring toxins, and that's why they have such a strong skins. It's a defensive mechanism. And humans obviously consume them in profound quantities, and when you're young and supple and you have a very thick mucosa layer, you are protected. But when you get sick or you have inflammatory bowel disease or this or that, they do cause a lot of damage. And there are websites that specialize on a low histamine, meaning non-inflammatory diets, and those foods are taboo on those sites among the natural foods.
All right, I got an email here from Rebecca in California. She says,
"Hi, Rebecca.
I've been taking laxatives for most of my adult life, over-the-counter products like X-Lax and Senna. About 10 years ago, a gastroenterologist put me on a product called PEG 3350 electrolyte solution, and I've been taking that for over 10 years. He said it's not a chemical laxative and just goes right through my system and out the other end. It works really well for me, but if I don't take it, I don't go. And I have been told that I have a very tortuous colon. What is your opinion on this product I'm taking? It's called Colite. Thanks so much, Rebecca."
Oh, well, let's go back to what we're talking about. We're talking about polyethylene glycol. It's a chemical substance, and it's a core component. It's referred to as PEG, polyethylene glycol. It's what it's a what is called oligomer, meaning it's like lots of molecules, very simple molecules bound together in a synthetic product. And the only difference between this product between polyethylene glycol and natural fiber is that it's not fermented in the large intestines, so it would not cause gases. And it is a core component of Miralax, Colas, a lot of other laxatives. I mean, it's used for Go Lightly, Trilite, Colite, Soft Lux, Lux-A-Day, Clear Lux. So, and it's also used for people before colonoscopies to clean them out. And it is known as Movicol, and it's universally referred between physicians as polyethylene glycol 3350. This substance is now on a watch list by the FDA as neurotoxic substance. And neurotoxic means it damages the nervous system and may also cause autism in young children. So you make your mind. Is it good for you or not?
Yeah, and that's the PEG product you're talking about.
That's correct. So generic term is PEG, polyethylene glycol 3350. But again, it's a core component of Soft Lux, Miralax, Glycolax, Colite, Lux-A-Day, and many other, and Miralax, obviously, and many other substances.
Okay, and so this could be contributing to damaging the colon?
Of course. I mean, because, in the younger people, they may get away with it because, again, they have a very thick mucosal layer. But older people, they probably will develop some damage from it. And forget about the colon itself. I mean, it starts causing damages inside the small intestine because it, again, blocks the digestion of nutrients. And apparently it also has some way into entering the bloodstream where it then causes neurotoxic damage. Okay,
and she mentions tortuous colon. I've never heard that term before. Have you?
It's, people use a lot of various, people use a term leaky gut syndrome, a condition that doesn't exist. And tortuous colon is maybe, some creative medical writer or armchair nutritionist made up this term. If I have a hard time moving stools and I have a tortuous colon because it's torture. No, it's just some BS term.
Okay. So now I wanted to ask you, what is a normal stool? How often should we go? How long should we be on the toilet? And all of those kind of nitty-gritty questions.
Okay, normal stool is light in weight, very small, no larger than your large finger. That's a thumb. That's your rule of thumb.
Okay.
It's you output no more than 150 grams per sitting. It's completely unnoticeable during defecation. You don't notice it. If you notice stools, and you have to strain, it means that you already have some problems. It's soft. And on my site you can find what is called Bristol Stool Scale, and it's rated there, and a very detailed explanation of what is right, what is wrong. It's light in color. It's not dark. It doesn't smell a lot, because if it smells, it means you have a lot of fermentation going on. Normal stool doesn't supposed to have a smell, and a lot of people also outside of smelling, they also smell with rotting, meaning lots of fermentation going on and rotting of undigested proteins. And these are pretty much core characteristics of normal stool. Oh, and by the way, you asked me a frequency. It's a great question. Frequency is technically you're supposed to move stools after every major meal. And our ancestors, they ate most often one time a day, maybe two at most. And usually they would move stools right after eating, because the act of eating stimulates what is called gastrocolic reflex, which in turn stimulates peristaltic mass movement, and that's what precipitates the urge sensation, and that's where you run into the toilet. Now, the problem for us people living in the cities, when we have urge sensation, we often either in the subway or in a car or in an office or next to a dirty bathroom, so we cannot do it. So we retain stools, withhold a bowel movement, and that's what leads to enlargement and hardening of the stools, and that's how we develop those problems. So if you have young children, never tell them, to suppress their gastrocolic reflex. Make sure that they do go to the bathroom, otherwise they will develop hemorrhoidal disease and constipation in their 20s and their 30s.
So I've heard recently that if someone has to use toilet paper, that's another thing that is not considered to be healthy, because animals go to the bathroom and they don't need toilet paper, and the healthier you are, the less toilet paper you need. Have you found that to be true?
Well, the idea of having to use toilet paper is perverted by itself. I mean, you really have to wash yourself up after stool, because all you do is just smear feces over your anus and perianal area, and for women that leads to vaginal infections. For men, it leads for penile infections, and then also when men, have sex, unprotected sex with women, they can cause them additional infections. So technically, but what in this is that people develop external hemorrhoids, and external hemorrhoids they're mainly unnoticeable, but they may lead to skin folds. And if you have to use a lot of toilet paper, that means you already have skin folds that contain feces, and you just smear them around. So technically speaking, an absolutely healthy person will need very, very little toilet paper. But still, toilet paper is not the right way to go because it's abrasive, because all it does is just smears feces around and it doesn't really clean you up. So at best, if you already have some problems, buy those baby wipes and use them. And when you come home, you have to have a flexible shower and wash yourself. And in Europe, Americans, they take shower every morning, and Europeans take shower maybe once a week, but they do have bidet in every toilet, meaning they wash, and the Japanese as well, meaning the special appliance where you wash yourself after toilet.
Yeah, we don't have those, and I don't know why, because it makes a lot of sense.
We're exceptional. Because we have lots of oil and lots of energy and good plumbing, and so we can afford to take shower every day. It's not as costly as, let's say, in Europe, where water was a very precious and costly resource as well as heat. And so bidet was preferable because people realize that, sex and clean anus is more important than having clean underarms.
Right. So how long should it take to go to the bathroom, do you think?
Seconds. Essentially, if you're healthy, you have normal bowel movements, it's like a and out.
Wow. So no iPad or no magazine by the...
No iPad. No, it's very, very bad because that's what causes hemorrhoids. Because when you sit in that specific position, and if you use in a squatting position, even worse, because then a lot of blood goes down into your pelvic region, and it can cause clots, and obviously it will lead to hemorrhoids.
Yeah, so if anyone has hemorrhoids, I guess you're looking at something that is a sign of poor colon health.
That is correct.
And so,
it's a sign of enlarged stools and a sign of straining.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so I don't even know where to go. So you mentioned a little while ago that...
Don't go to the toilet. We have to finish the show.
No, but you mentioned a while ago about people getting colonoscopies. I imagine those things would be very, very dangerous, wouldn't they?
Colonoscopies are very harmful for healthy people. First of all, they don't, I like what you heard, that they reduce the incidence of colon cancers. They don't actually. The number of cancers actually is larger now than it used to be before colonoscopies. They're very harmful to most people. It's a very important clinical tool. If a person presents himself or herself to a physician with a bleeding, with blood in stools, it's critical. But when we take a absolutely healthy 50-year-old and send him for colonoscopy, it's a very disruptive experience, and also it is the highest risk medical procedure. It's essentially a surgery. Mm-hmm. And by my estimate and research, the number of deaths from or very serious ill effects from colonoscopy probably exceeds the same from cancers. Jeez. In any given year. And I have a very extensive overview of this matter on my website. It's a very long and very substantial analysis of what's going on during colonoscopies. It's on the GodSense menu. It's entitled Colonoscopy, Is It Worth the Risk?
Oh, wow. How high up do they go when they do the colonoscopies?
They go to the very end. They go all the way down to ileocal valve. And sometimes when they need to do a test of bacterial infectation, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, they may also enter ileocal valves through a special tool and take a probe there.
I did one a while back, probably 5 years ago. I think the worst part about it was that concoction they make you drink before you have it done.
That was polyethylene glycol.
Oh, it's horrible stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is horrible stuff, yeah. It's not so much by itself horrible, but just ingesting 3 liters of water in the span of like 20-30 minutes, it's very, very hard, and then obviously have a very violent reaction after taking that water.
So what are the polyps that people often get taken out during those procedures? What are those a sign of?
95% of those polyps are non-cancerous. 70% of all polyps are missed anyway. And 70% of colon cancers are developed from flat lesions, not from polyps. So it's really, as I say, it's a BS. I mean, your chance of actually preventing colon cancer is nil. And also, all the research demonstrated that even people who have cancerous polyps removed, they still develop colon cancers regardless.
Wow,
and it's all clinical data. It's like I have this huge article on, again, it's a huge essay on my site. It's multiple pages and also pages about how to prevent colon cancer. And it has nothing to do, it's not like coming from me. It's all coming from mainstream academia. A lot of people saying, are you into alternative medicine? God forbid. I have a traditional medical education, nothing alternative about my work. It's all mainstreamed. And that's why traditional doctors have such a hard time with my work, because they really cannot find where I contradict what they're being taught, and they realize that they're being taken advantage of. They're being essentially misinformed.
Wow. So what are some things people can do to increase their digestive capacities? You know, do you recommend things like enzymes or hydrochloric acid or
well, that's different.
Like
it's different organs. When we take enzymes and when we take hydrochloric acids, it's the only intent of this is to improve digestion of proteins in our stomachs.
Mm-hmm.
My advice to everybody who have a problem with digesting proteins in our stomach, in your stomachs, is don't eat proteins 4 times a day. Because that's what causes damage. Because let's look at it technically, from a technical point of view. In absolutely healthy men at age 35 or women at age 35, it takes from 6 to 9 hours to digest in a stomach a piece of protein. So if you got up at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, you have your breakfast, bacon and eggs, very hard to digest proteins, and you start to digest them at 8 in the morning, they will finish digesting around 2 o'clock at best, or if you don't already have a very good digestion, around 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, at 12 o'clock, you had a turkey sandwich, and you added more proteins on top. And not only proteins, you also added a salad, and you took a couple of drinks and some snack, an apple and glass of orange juice. And now all that freaking mess is sitting in your stomach. Stomach is really trying very hard to digest those proteins. That's all the thing it does. Stomach has only 3 functions: sterilize foods with acid, digest proteins, and store excess food if you overate. But that's all it does. So now you suddenly have a ton of, you have your breakfast digesting, then you added lunch on top of it, then around 4 o'clock you have a snack, and it's a lot of people say, I eat healthy, so they take protein bar, and so digestion goes on and on and on. And then you come home at 7 o'clock, you have your full-blast dinner with proteins again. And what it means is that by the time your dinner will finish up digesting, it's already 4 in the morning. And you will have a next meal at 8. And so your stomach doesn't even have enough time to recover its mucosal membrane and heal. And that's how we develop ulcers and gastritis. And very often by the age 50, I would say a great number of people who have this lifestyle, they develop also what is called atrophic gastritis, meaning the cells which are responsible for producing hydrochloric acids and enzymes, they're dead. They essentially have a scarring tissue inside their stomach, and they no longer digest foods. So those people, they do need enzymes. They may need betaine, which is a component which we use instead of hydrochloric acid. And it may help them. But if you're healthy and you're still digesting normally, don't be crazy. Just don't eat proteins 4 times a day. And in fact, people in Japan, they eat rice in the morning, rice in the afternoon, rice during the day, rice as a snack, and only proteins they eat only once in the evening.
Well, on your website, you mentioned, I think in the beginning parts of your journey, you read that book Fit for Life, and they talk a lot about food combining. Do you have your thoughts on combining starches with protein and how that affects the digestion? Fit
for Life was vegetarian diet, heavy on juice, so there was not even an issue of proteins. I am not so much for food combining. I am against of just consuming proteins all day long. I think proteins should be eaten only once, when you're relaxed, when you're at home, when you can digest, when they can, because when you're a programmer and you work sitting in front of your computer, when you sit and work, you're tense and your stomach is constrained, so it cannot perform its function, and the food just sits there. And the older you get, the more problems you develop in that way. So if you just do this, you do not eat proteins 4 times a day. You only in the first half of a day you eat foods that don't require gastric digestion, then you'll never have to combine anything. And there is nothing wrong with having some starches along with your meats, because it's otherwise very difficult to get satiety if you just eat only meat in the evening. And it will work perfectly fine. Our stomach can accommodate everything. It will digest its protein, but just don't overload it. What did you say? It's very difficult to get anxiety? Is that what you said? When you eat just protein? Satiety, meaning satisfaction from food so that you are not hungry anymore. Satiety. Oh, I see. Yeah, because that book I know makes a big deal about, even though it's a vegetarian style book, I know they talk a lot about, not combining your proteins with your starches and that kinds of things. If you are really healthy, do you have a quicker transit time anyway, regardless of all that, of your food? Not really, no. If you chew very well, I mean, the factors that impact transit time is quality of chewing.
Uh-huh.
So if you chew very well, yes. Quality of food preparation. If let's say proteins are overcooked, it takes a long time. It's always more difficult. People think that ground beef is easier to digest than steak, but actually it's in reverse. Ground beef takes much longer to digest than a steak because we chew steak well, and ground beef we just swallow as is, so it takes much longer to digest. It's very important not to consume fluid. We have to always consume fluids in advance of your meal and along with meals, but not after meal, especially 2-3 hours, because if, let's say, you're in the process of digesting your steak 3-4 hours down the road, and that's where you already have a peak of acidity and enzymatic activity in your stomach, and suddenly you just pour over a glass of Coke, you just dilute the concentration of digestive juices, and everything starts from scratch.
But it's okay, you said, to drink a little bit while you're eating.
It's not only okay, it's absolutely must, because the stomach doesn't pump water inside to digest foods. It only pumps enzymes and hydrochloric acids to a proper level of concentration. So if you don't have enough fluids along with your meal, it means that then the body will have to take fluids from your plasma, and from blood plasma, and then you feel dehydrated and drowsy.
Wouldn't the water dilute the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, or no?
In the beginning, there is almost no hydrochloric acid when you begin your meal. It's peak concentration of hydrochloric acids kicks about 4 hours into the digestive cycle.
Wow. And there's also different times of the day, isn't there, that you produce more hydrochloric acid? Is that right?
No, not really. I mean, if you eat once a day, proteins you produce, but because people say it is a different, is because they layer protein food on top. So if we put in a zond to measure up acidity there, it will be different during the different times of day. But usually the highest degree of production is when you are relaxed. It's very important to be relaxed when you are digesting meats.
Golly. So a while back you were talking about the antibiotics that a lot of people take. How damaging are those things?
Very destructive. I mean, they decimate intestinal flora, and by themselves, many of them are toxic in some other ways that we don't know. But the primary damage comes from decimation of intestinal flora. And if you have that flora damaged, then it leads to autoimmune conditions. It obviously compromises the composition of your stools, because dead bacteria is what retains fluids in stools. And that's where we need to add probiotics. And probiotics, by the way, they don't replace our native flora. They don't do nothing. All it is they just become fillers, safer fillers than fiber, but fillers nevertheless. They don't do what natural flora that came from when you were born from a mother's colostrum.
If you've taken antibiotics once in your life and you lose a certain amount of your bacteria, is it possible to recolonize that bacteria, or?
Well, if you lead a lifestyle of my cat and dog, where you pick up feces, like my two cats, they share the same what is it called? Box. I mean, they share the same pen for doing those things, and then when they walk out, they kind of lick they cleanse themselves out, and including licking their paws, so they do get reinfected back even if they would take antibiotics. We humans don't do this, and dogs, well known for eating feces on when they find something on the street. Again, we humans don't do it, but in fact, like ancient people, when they were developing digestive problems, they were taking feces from animals and eating them, and they were considered very high in vitamins and obviously in that innate flora. Today is the only way to fully restore intestinal microflora after taking antibiotics is what is called fecal transplant or fecal bacteria therapy. And it's becoming mainstream. And in fact, I published this information in 2005 on my website, fibermedicine.godsons.org later. And that's how this entered into mainstream in the United States. But I knew about this technique when I was in medical school. It was described in the Russian medical literature.
What is the technique?
Taking a stool from a healthy donor and infusing it right into your large intestine.
Is it done through a surgical procedure, or how does that?
Oh, no. You just you just blend the stool of a healthy person. Before that, you undergo antibiotic treatment to wipe out whatever out there may be damaging, and then you make a 1% salt solution, physiological solution, add up stool, blend it, and infuse it with enema, right?
Okay.
Zond or endoscope.
Wow.
If you like, I can send you this information. I mean, there's a great deal of articles was written on those subjects, including protocols. and I'll be very happy to send it to you so you can republish on your website.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
I'll send you all the reference material.
I question how many people are going to do that, but it's at least
apparently lately it's because it's now in mainstream. It was described in New York Times and Slate and Economist and pretty much every academic journal. It's becoming pretty much mainstream. It's a difficult procedure to do because obviously we have this very negative association with stools, and a lot of doctors don't want to do it, and people are reluctant to do it on themselves. I mean, it's not a very complex. It's a pretty simple procedure, but how do you know if, let's say, your wife or your child has a healthy stool? So I actually took that information out of my site for legal reasons. I'm just concerned of liability because some idiot will kill himself or herself, and then I'll be at fault.
Oh, I see.
Like the weakest party at fault. But in general, it's now completely mainstream, and it's discussed everywhere.
That's crazy. So, with a lot of people in their intestines, most people have really, I would imagine, really misshapen intestines, and they're probably much thicker than they should be. What's the correct size, you think, of the intestines?
When you are referring to small intestine or large intestine?
Well, I guess both. I guess I'm trying to figure out how thick they should be versus what people are.
Well, they don't really change throughout life. I mean, you get whatever you get when you as you developed as adult. I don't think they're really misshapen. I mean, it's a misnomer. They stay pretty much the same size. But if you do have some problems, let's say you have problems with motility, what you need to do, you lighten up the load. And what's the easiest way to lighten up the load? You take out fiber from this formula.
Gosh, that's so crazy. So what is your colorectal recovery program all about?
Colorectal recovery program is essentially for people who have functional constipation.
Okay.
It's really not effective for people with late-stage constipation, chronic constipation, where you already have a lot of deal of colorectal damage and you have no longer you perceive urge sensation. It still helps one of the components, but essentially it's a very simple formula. It's a high-quality multivitamin formula plus L-glutamine, a very common component, and plus a very special formula that I developed. It's a combination of potassium ascorbate, magnesium ascorbate, and calcium ascorbate, meaning salt of vitamin C, and in a very, very little amount, it moisturizes stools, and I refer to it as a colonic moisturizer, and it's called Hydra C. And for people with early stage constipation, or people simply with hard stools, or people who need to strain, or for people with hemorrhoids, or for people for diverticular disease, or for people with anal fissure, it allows for them to attain unassisted normal stools without straining, and overcome a lack of urge sensation, a very strong one, and kind of reduce stool cystitis very quickly. And it's a very effective formula. It's unlike that stuff, there's a whole bunch of laxatives, but all of them work for the same, for different mechanisms. Fiber is a bulking mechanism. Milk of magnesia is hyperosmotic laxative. Senna is essentially a substance which causes irritation, and that irritation causes inflammation, and then we get a lot of fluids coming into the large intestine to neutralize it, and that's how we obtain bowel movements. And there are some other classes. And this thing is hypoallergenic and non-addictive. And it really works well, and especially for people with sporadic constipation, like travel constipation, stress-related constipation. A lot of girls get married for the first time in their lives. They go out with their husband, and they live under the same roof, in the same bed, share the same bathroom. They're embarrassed to go to a bathroom. They miss one stool. Suddenly they're constipated. So it's a lifesaver for your honeymoon or wedding trip. So it's just, and it's very well described on my website. So the best I can recommend. Now, when people call me and say, "Oh, I heard about you," not email me, and they say, "Oh, I read about your website. Tell me what to do." And I tell to everybody, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I have no idea what to do. I don't know your medical history. I don't know what kind of problems you have. Specifically to avoid telling and being a clairvoyant, I wrote this website, all the information out there up front. It's all open, no secrets. Go and read it. Study and help yourself. I mean, if you spend 12 years in high school, 12 years in school, including 4 years in high school, and 4 years in college, and a couple of years in postgraduate program, why can't you spend 2 freaking hours to learn how to move bowels without killing yourself?
Yeah, we should be taught this in school, actually.
Absolutely.
Because people just don't know how to take care of themselves. So this colorectal recovery program, is it something that you would do a one-time thing, or would you be on it for a certain amount of time? Or
for people with functional constipation, The ones that can be easily elevated is a one-time deal. For people with chronic constipation with anorectal damage, nerve damage, it's probably for life. But again, they don't have to take a whole program. They only need this Hydra C component, which is only like $25, and one bottle may last you 2 months. So it's very cheap. And also, considering the fact that it doesn't cause further damage to your health, you save a lot of money from further treatments.
Wow, so Hydro C, the colonic moisturizer, is something that you could be on for a long time, and that would help generally healthy people just have better colon health. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, absolutely. It will essentially do what you do. It does from outside what you attain with enemas. But the beauty of this preparation is that it works within an hour and a half. It's not like, you take a traditional laxative and you need to wait 24 hours until they reach colon. This thing works in an hour, and you're done. So you don't take any risk. You can still lead a normal life. You don't have to, can you imagine you take a laxative and then suddenly you have a hit 20 hours down the road and you're in your car or you're in a subway. Right. It's a kind of very, very, very dangerous situations.
Now you don't see people, do you?
I used to see patients, but I stopped because it's physically very exhausting. When you come to see a doctor, traditional doctor, doctor will just take a look at your blood test, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you get a prescription. Uh-huh. You come to somebody like me, it's not a treatment, it's a coaching. And I have to spend with you enormous amount of hours, and also to make a commitment to assist you for next 3 months or 6 months to straighten things up. And also because I'm skilled in so many other subjects, people kind of try to take advantage of it. And I ended up essentially providing enormous amount of just pro bono care, and draining myself in the process. And I decided, if I have this valuable information, I'd rather write books and do webinars and seminars, because if I see one person, I can only help one person, and probably not always well, because a lot of people don't have means to get this kind of help. But if I write a book, I can help thousands, 10,000s, millions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wanted to ask you about the GI recovery too, and as well as the other product. How do you pronounce that? The Esterofloth?
GI recovery, it contains L-glutamine. It's essentially a prebiotic, meaning it's a formula which allows you, it kind of thickens up the mucosa layer, because bacteria in the gut, they live in mucosa. They don't live in the lumen, meaning inside the gut, they live in mucosa. Okay. A lot of people don't know that, but that's where they reside. And so if you have some food components that will, some supplements that will feed that mucosa, it will allow those bacteria to kind of survive and stick in there for a longer period of time.
Okay, and that other one is a probiotic acidophilus.
It's inside of multivitamin complex, which is morning and evening packs. Or it can be purchased separate.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you have Ageless Nutrition Daily Packs, and then you have separate supplements on their own.
And they're all very inexpensive. A lot of people say expensive. They're not expensive. I mean, you have now a very popular supplement, VLC. I think it's like $80 a bottle. And our probiotic is exactly the same, from the same factory, exact same content. And it's only like $20.
Wow, this is great information. So are you doing a lot of speaking around the country or writing new books coming up here? Or what kind of things?
Well, I'm developing now I did a lot of research on hypertension. I stumbled into this field by accident. My primary skills were always diabetes, cardiovascular disorders, weight loss, but not being a physician, it's very difficult, or endocrinologist, it's very difficult to work with those conditions. And something like constipation and hemorrhoids are functional conditions, so I can dispense advice without much risks. And also I have something that works very well to help alleviate those conditions. And that's why I switched my efforts. But now I was investigating drugs for hypertension, and I came to a very striking conclusion, because about 70 million people in the United States are affected by hypertension. About 50 million of them are taking drugs. And all those drugs, they are essentially more or less systemic relaxants, and they affect our muscles. And anything that affects muscles also affects your colon and your stomach and your intestines, and affects their function. And so people who take these drugs, they develop a lot of various problems. And also a lot of information is coming out lately that those drugs are actually not even effective. If you go to Merck Manual says that in two-thirds of the cases, hypertension drugs don't work at all. So you may take Norvasc and you have like this false sense of security that is helping you, but it doesn't. And if you take calcium channel blockers, it's known for the last 12 years that they actually increase the rate of heart attacks and strokes by a very substantial margin. About 40 to 50,000 people a year die from those drugs.
What are those calcium channel blockers? What are some of the drug names?
Good question. Just give me a second and I'll tell you. I need to open up a document. Again, because I'm not a practicing physician. Like I know the generic names, but I don't deal with them on a day-to-day basis. So it's difficult for me to remember all those names.
What are the calcium channel blockers taken for?
Primarily for hypertension, congestive heart failure, coronary disease, atherosclerosis, to essentially make sure that the blood flows. Trade names, there are lots of them actually. Here's the names. Well, Norvasc I mentioned, right? And its generic name is amlodipine. And then Plendil, generic name is felodipine. Cardazyme is a very well known. Dilacor, and I might not pronounce them actually even right. Delicia, Tiazac, their generic name is Dilitazem, Calon, Cavera, Izoptin, Verellin, Verapamil, that's a well-known name. Procardia, a well-known one. Adalat, generic name is Nifedapine. Cardin, generic name Neocardin. Sular, Nizoldapine. And Vascor, its generic name Bepredil. And I'm developing now a webinar specifically on the subject to essentially assist people with digestive disorders to wean themselves off those drugs because A, they don't work at all. They increase the amount of cardiovascular problems. They cause digestive problems that in turn actually increase problems with cardiovascular system because all the systemic inflammations inside your gut, they also become systemic inflammations for endothelium of your blood vessels, and that increases atherosclerosis. And if you don't digest nutrients, especially fats, then you develop dementia, high probability of strokes, and so forth and so on.
So when will that webinar be available? And is it a paid webinar or is it a free thing? Or
it will be paid, yes. I publish so much stuff for free, and what's really the most bizarre thing, when you do something for free, people don't trust it.
I know.
And it's kind of very difficult to do something for free unless you're the United States government with plenty of money. So I decided to make it paid, and that's the only way to actually attract attention to it, because then we have this great network of affiliate sites, people who will promote this. And as it sounds kind of pragmatic, but that's the only way that I can actually make it known. My work is not really well known precisely because it's free. And I try to work with like some major publishers, and they're saying that my work is too controversial. They're afraid to get involved, and also it kind of steps into a lot of people. Like for example, when I have this article about colonoscopy and it attacks the likes of Kati Couric, and everybody's saying to me, listen, Kati Couric is so influential. She's a friend of Oprah. If we do something to piss either one of them, sorry for using this term, then we will no longer be able to promote our answers. So essentially, I am persona non grata in publishing circles. People just don't want to touch me.
Right.
But when you go and do something for money and allow other people to make money, that becomes great promotional opportunity, and people really love, come to it. And if you go on my website, on Amazon.com, and read those reviews of people who read my book. And again, I cannot doctor those reviews. They're unsolicited. And there's people all over themselves how much it helps them.
Wow.
And even with all this, which something can be turned into a best-selling book, selling millions of copies, they don't want to touch it. I have one of the top agents in New York. The guy was like a head of Agents Association in New York, works for one of the most premier agency. He cannot get my book pushed through because they say we don't want to touch the subject.
Yeah, well, it's going to cut into $1 million industry or $1 billion industry. So.
Billions, tens of billions, yes.
Wow. Well, thank you, Konstantin, for being on our show. That was quite an education we all had there.
Justin, thank you very, very much for inviting me in, for allowing me to express my very controversial points of views. And hopefully your hard work and what I did will help your listeners to advance their health, to improve their well-being, and especially to help their children and also older parents. That's where it's really most effective. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. And the website, again, is gutsense.org. And Konstantin, would you mind holding on while I close out the show?
By all means, I'll stay.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on another edition. Wow, that was quite a show. And I had a lot of fun talking with Konstantin about his information. Hopefully, you got a lot of benefit out of that. Again, you can check out this show at extremehealthradio.com/44. If you're interested in learning more information about this and getting his book and all of that stuff, you'll see all the links there. If you found value from this show, would you do me a favor and click like on the Facebook button on this page and follow us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and send the link to your friends. And we're kind of relying on you guys to help promote our show here. So thank you again for listening. And don't forget, we have a store as well on our website with lots of great products like blenders and rebounders and things like that. And we are 100% listener supported. So if you would like to donate to help keep our website and work sustainable so that we can keep providing you more information, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can donate through PayPal as little as $1 if you'd like. Every little bit will help. But if you can't, that's not a big deal. I just want you to learn as much as you can and